The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports, media, industrial, entertainment complex. I am joined, as always, by Steve and by our Eric Sato, the super sub, Alex. How y'all doing today?
Doing just awesome. You know, training camp has started this week, so we've been all involved in trying to cover that for the other show. But I'd like to point out that the Rich Rogers World Tour has continued on for yet another week. It seems like that guy has been vacationing for 3 months now, and I very, very much envy that situation.
Yeah, training camp started, and Steve and I have both been swamped at work.
Yeah.
So we're just desperately trying to put up new content on our website while we're trying to also save our new jobs or old jobs or whatever you want to call them.
Because we can't reasonably expect Jamal to, you know, post all this stuff and do the work and everything. So I feel bad about it, but there's just nothing we can do about it.
And I don't know what Sean does. So
He's lost in the Rocky Mountains.
we have Chris. Chris actually knows web stuff, and he's doing nothing.
I haven't been asked.
It's a fair statement. We haven't actually asked him to help. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we're happy to do IJB here because there's lots of good stuff always. The beautiful thing about a sports business show is there's no downtime, right? There's always something crazy going on in the world of sports business. That's why I like it so much.
So, with that, let's get after this show's topics. Excuse me. First, we're going to start off with a pretty fascinating long-form article about the TV rights contracts and kind of the story of how they've gotten to some new homes for both the UFC and the WWE. What's the Sports Business Insider? Is that the name of the publication, Steve?
It's bizjournals.com. bizjournals.com.
We'll make sure the link is in the show notes if you want. It's actually a great long form, some good investigative journalism read. The long and the short of it is that these kind of, sports entertainment, I guess technically as wrestling is called, and UFC, which are, pretty huge properties in the sports media world, had a lot of backstage drama about where they would go that's also wrapped up in the TV and media landscape in general. It's wrapped up in a lot of how the media landscape in general is rapidly changing almost on a week-to-week basis. And also a lot of inside look around how much of a sort of insider's club this whole thing is, with lots of it being, amongst really a handful of 5 to 7 people deciding or being the key leads on where this stuff ends up. Steve, you brought the story to our attention. Do you want to give a little bit of the details, and then we can jump into a lot of where the nuance is?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, first of all, the WWE has been on the USA Network and has been doing their own pay-per-views for many, many, many years. They've been with the USA Network for 25 years. The USA Network is part of the NBC family.
Comcast.
Did I say UFC? I meant WWE.
Yeah, you said WWE. Yeah. You're good.
Okay, all right. Okay, UFC, on the other hand, is a fairly new product, but they've been on Fox, and they've done they do almost, I think, a monthly, practically, pay-per-view product that has been around for several years now. What's interesting to me about this is that, number one, these are viewed as competing products, wherein the WWE is not sports. It's entertainment. It's not
it's scripted.
Yeah, it's not a competition. It's entertainment, but it is in direct competition to the UFC. And so a big part of this article was about these various networks. This involves ESPN, Fox, and NBC competing to put both of these products on their networks in such a way that works for everybody and still pay out millions of dollars. The public, for some reason, I think we all probably watched some wrestling as a kid, but the public accepts wrestling as a sports type thing, whereas this article makes it very, very clear that the networks view the WWE as entertainment and purely an entertainment product. I thought that's very interesting. But the bottom line here, and we'll get to how, is that the UFC has now signed a $1.5 billion agreement with ESPN, which is $300 million per year for ESPN to hold all their rights. Streaming, which was a whole nother set of dramas, and weekly shows, and I believe the UFC then continues their pay-per-view stuff. And then the WWE signed 2 separate agreements with NBC Universal, which will keep Monday Night Raw on USA Network, and then Fox gets the Friday Night SmackDown show. So that's kind of the basics, but talk to me about how your interests lie in the way this was presented.
Well, I'm a little surprised to see, after all these years, wrestling going to a network and not staying on cable.
Well, see, USA is a part of NBC, so there's not a guarantee that it's going to go anywhere.
Well, no. But if it's going on Fox, it's going on Fox on Friday.
Oh, UFC. See, I keep getting these two mixed up. Yeah.
No. I'm saying you said WWE is going to Fox, right?
WWE is going to Fox and NBC Universal.
Yeah, I don't think, at least not to my recollection, I don't think they ever had wrestling on network television.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's always been on like TNT or Sci-Fi Channel or USA Network or something.
No,
it
was
that.
its lifeblood was definitely syndication, and then when cable dominated, it was definitely a cable property. Yeah, there may have been, actually, if you go all the way back to the '60s, there may have been some primetime wrestling, but generally through the history of wrestling, it's been a syndication and a cable property.
Well, I think it's interesting to say that, note that what Fox bought was the SmackDown program, which is traditionally a Friday night program. ESPN is, it's always a struggle for every network to program Friday nights in a way that gets more than 2 viewers nationally, because everybody's out partying and drinking and blah, blah, blah. So, we talked about the Big Three basketball league earlier, and that has been on Friday nights, because sports... is one thing that works in ratings. And so now they're bringing on SmackDown, which is a sports, whatever you want to call it, entertainment product. So they're getting away from scripted dramas and or news products on Friday nights in an attempt to make any money at all.
Well, also think about what's the core demo for pro wrestling is 12 to 13-year-old boys, and they're not doing stuff on Friday night. So it actually, makes a lot of sense, because the majority of their captured audience has no other, options than TV or home entertainment on a Friday night.
And probably college kids, who are in the dorms and, sitting around as a group, that kind of thing.
I wonder if you did a breakdown, what age most people stop watching professional wrestling at some point, right?
Well, let's do a little survey here. Who among the three of us was a wrestling fan? I'll just tell I used to watch as a kid the WWE years ago in the Hulk Hogan era,
Mm-hmm.
And I watched a little bit of the other what was the other wrestling network called?
WCW.
Yeah, thank you. I watched a little bit of that up until probably I was like 22, 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
That's my history. What about you guys?
I never really got that into either of them. I had a friend who was really into it up through high school. And I mean, like, he collected little action figures. He had, like, all the throw pillow thing. They had a lot of merch back in the, like, 90s and 80s. He collected all of it. So, I had one friend that was really into it. I probably stopped watching it 8.
I was pretty into wrestling, probably similar era as Steve. Kind of when it was the WWF and it was the King and the Hulk Hogan era and lots of classic wrestlers. I was pretty into it. I was pretty nerdy. I would buy like the wrestling magazines that were basically modeled off the boxing magazines in terms of style and layout and kinds of writing. In fact, often were the same publishers and often the same writer stringers. I think as soon as you get kind of past middle school into early high school, you stop watching it on a regular basis. But I've always loved wrestling culture. There's been a big wrestling rock and roll connection in a lot of ways, and the sort of bravado. I love the theater of it. I don't really watch it much, but I always consider wrestling culture as some sort of primordial soup of my personality. And like something like some current things, like I love Glow on Netflix, which is about the glorious ladies of wrestling. I love that. And also the Andre the Giant documentary on HBO from about 2 months ago was fantastic. So I still follow and enjoy those connections to wrestling culture, but like in terms of SmackDown or Raw or actually watching anything wrestling, it's probably been 20 years.
Yeah, it's been a while, and I wasn't that into it. Back when I was a kid, my parents thought wrestling was going to melt my brain, basically. So I didn't watch a ton of it. But you just brought up something really
interesting. Look at your brain now.
I know. See, that's what happens when you watch wrestling as a kid. I'm living proof of it. No, but what's interesting is that ESPN, and this article goes into it a little bit, the Biz Journal article, ESPN has been cozying up to the WWE for, 2 years now. You started to see them mention wrestling stuff on some of their shows every once in a while. They'd have an input if there was a major wrestling story. They had the Ric Flair 30 for 30, on this past year. And ESPN has always stayed away from wrestling because it's truly not sports. It's truly a scripted drama, basically. And I didn't realize. I wondered at the time why they were doing it. Now we know why, and the answer is that this negotiation between the WWE and or the UFC was going on, and ESPN was cozying up to it in an attempt to figure out what they want to do. And now we know. That's what that was all about. But as far as the UFC goes, what's always interested me about the UFC, and I'm not a huge fan, and I'm not going to pretend to be, but it's kind of replaced boxing in the mind of a certain demo, at least, I think. Like Alex knows, I'm an old school boxing fan, but I think the younger generation, meaning millennials, and I guess Alex would have to talk to this, I think very few of that group are boxing fans, and all of them are UFC fans.
I would say fans. Anybody who's into fighting as a sport, yes, you're right, that they're going to be way more into watching the UFC. I think if you look at the numbers are still, puny in terms of TV ratings on UFC.
Well, ESPN just paid $1.5 billion.
Right, but I found a second article that had the numbers for both of them, and WWE pulls in an average of 2.5 million. UFC's pulling in less than 1 million viewers per fight.
One thing I took away from that, and I would agree. Now, I'm not here trying to tell you that they're the same in terms of one's a legitimate sport and one is scripted drama, but they're still in the sort of people who like to watch fighting on TV demographic broadly, and WWE crushes UFC in terms of viewers, popularity, and so I find that pretty fascinating.
It could be that it's an established franchise too. That could be a big factor.
Well, I think what causes the ceiling on UFC is it's fairly brutal. I mean, boxing has rules. It's about punching. It's not that it's not brutal, but UFC is another level of televised violence. And I think generally people would still prefer fake cartoon violence and the theater to the kind of brutality you see in the octagon. And I think that the numbers staying steady bear that out.
Well,
yeah.
Well, if you go back to the history of the UFC, before the UFC existed, Dana White is the guy who owns it, and he's really the guy that deserves the credit for bringing this product to sort of the forefront of culture. But before then, the Ultimate Fighting had no rules at all, and it wasn't popular. It was in back alleys, and it was in little clubs, and it was not on TV anywhere. But there were
it was a step above bum fights.
Yeah, exactly. It was an organized bum fight, and there were no rules, it was no holds barred at all. There are rules in UFC, and it's not no holds barred anymore, and it truly is a combination of boxing and martial arts. And so it is more of a competition now, and that's what Dana White has done, because he recognized that the UFC could not just bring bum fights to Fox and have anybody, and probably have the FCC all over you and everything else. So that's the development of it. Sorry, I cut you off, Alex. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say you were talking about what people would rather watch. If you're going purely on what's more entertaining to see, somebody jump off a top rope and fly halfway across the ring and land on the other guy, and I know it's scripted, I know the other guy's catching him, whatever, is that more entertaining, or is it watching two people basically roll on the ground for 2 minutes?
Depends on what you want. If you're into purely the competition of it, the UFC is for you. But if you just want to be entertained, I think what you and Chris are saying is probably accurate. And I know there's been months or years when the Monday Night Raw program has approached Monday Night Football in ratings.
If you put prime, it definitely
did.
did.
If you put Cleveland and I don't know, you put Cleveland and the Jets on, and then you have a good Monday Night Raw program in competition to it, the ratings are going to be close.
And one thing that UFC definitely has taken a couple pages out of pro wrestling's book is the kind of they've tried to play up some of their celebrities. They've tried to create rivalries. I mean, some of those exist. I'm not saying it's completely fabricated, but the Colin McGregor, like that bus attack, they've started to do stunt type stuff to create more bigger than life personalities to increase the interest in their fights.
Well, I'm not.
But does that go to wrestling, or does that go more back to how boxing it was trying to stay
it's getting
relevant
attention.
back in the day?
It's getting him attention, and I don't think the Colin McGregor thing was a setup, because he got charged with felony assault for that and pled guilty to some lesser charge. So I don't know if that was a setup, WWE style setup. I think that was Colin McGregor being a thug.
I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. I think it can be a bit of both, but there's no doubt that they're trying to create bigger than life personalities, and crossing them over into boxing and stuff. So those are, they're all promotional things. And yes, I agree, boxing has done that in the past. It's just that of the 3 fights type of, broadcast fights, they're the third of the 3. So at this point.
Yeah. Now, what we really haven't really addressed, it's really was sort of the focus of this article, is this article really shows you, for those of you interested in the sports, in the media landscape, how a closed, incestuous relationship all this stuff really is. Because as Chris said in the beginning of it, the same 7 people, 5, 6, 7 people negotiated all of these deals,
and have been even worked for each other in the past, right? Or they've even jumped. They've even worked at these different places, regardless of where they are now.
Yeah. People jump ship from ESPN to Comcast and all that stuff.
And at one point, CAA, which is Creative Artists Agency, was negotiating both of these deals on different sides. It's this goes in line with the idea that Disney's buying Fox and Comcast, and then there's Comcast just bowed out of it, but AT&T is trying to jump into this. It's 20 years ago, these networks were independent, or they had independent ownership, and now all of these networks are
basically 4 companies.
Yeah, exactly. Disney,
it's Viacom, it's Disney, whatever CBS's mother entity is. I think CBS is still the mother.
No,
entity
it's not.
For them, right?
It's not. No, but let's see if we can get this right, because Disney is going to own Fox, but not the Fox News Channel.
Right. 21st Century Fox is the way to
21st Century Fox, right? And they own ABC and ESPN, whereas Viacom, I think it is, owns NBC. I think. Isn't that right? And then CBS is the other one, and we're going to look that up here because it's bugging me.
And NBC Universal. And you can't forget AT&T with their moves recently, now owning... Well, they own DirecTV, which they're integrating a lot of this stuff into with their phone plans, and they just bought Time Warner. So they're consolidating too. And then you can't forget Amazon and Netflix.
Yeah, well, but they're not getting into the broadcast side of it at all. Amazon and Netflix. I don't think they have any interest in it.
I think they will.
I mean, buying like a TV
No, but they're
network.
buying up live rights. They're interested in that's the same thing.
They're getting into that side of broadcast, yes.
Okay, and the other thing that was interesting to me in that is that a big part of the WWE deal was the streaming rights for this, and and the same with the UFC. But interestingly enough, the ESPN Plus streaming rights for the UFC deal were not. The CEO of ESPN did not have authority to negotiate that. That was withheld by Disney.
Well, this is This is I was so relishing this because we've argued a couple times, and that about the lack of or the separation between ESPN and Disney. I think going back to, I can't remember what big contract it was, but ESPN paid a ton of money. And I said, well, this really, it's not about ESPN. It's about Disney's consolidation of entertainment properties ultimately. And I'll, this was a pretty big data point in my theory on that. And that ESPN is not a company. It's a brand. That's how it's situated itself. It's a very powerful brand. It makes a lot of sense for Disney to continue that brand and to keep with some of that separation of verticals within the horizontal and all that good biz speak. But the reality is, ESPN, those big contracts and those big media buys, those ultimately rest with Disney. They may let ESPN do a lot of the work, but the ultimate deciders are Disney.
No, you're absolutely right. That's true. ESPN used to be a company, and now they're a subsidiary of Disney. But I think at some point, ESPN's got to stop spending all this money. Because your brands have to be financially viable, right? Mm-hmm. And ESPN, we went over this, I don't know, last year on a show 7 or 8 months ago when I read out all the rights that ESPN has bought. They are literally paying billions every year. Yeah. And they spent $15 million on a new studio for their Get Up show in the morning, which is Mike Greenberg, Michelle Beadle, and Jalen Rose. And they're paying the three of them $15 million a year. And that show is just hemorrhaging money. They have no viewers at all. They're averaging like 150,000 people a day, hemorrhaging money. And so at some point, I realize that having all these rights is cachet, and it shows how powerful the ESPN name is. But at some point, they've got to make money on this. And if people don't watch the UFC on whatever day they put it on, they're going to lose money. I don't know how they can keep going like this. It's like the federal government just drunken spending constantly over there at ESPN.
I don't disagree, but I partially disagrry. And here's where I disagree. Like, yes, the sort of those kind of what shows to highlight, etc., those kind of things, and those could sink ESPN, especially as a brand. But the live rights, I mean, the gold rush is in live rights, not just exclusive to sports, but sports is, kind of the top of the food chain in terms of something that you have to watch live. So it is a huge battleground. And so Disney may dissolve ESPN at some point, but if they hold all the rights to the live content, then that's still a wise investment for them. Or there will be winners or losers eventually with that. But that's Disney using ESPN to gobble up those live rights. If it makes sense for them to dissolve ESPN, they will.
Well, you're assuming that the rights agreements give Disney the right to do whatever they want with it. We haven't read these contracts, and I don't know that it's accurate to say that, for example, the NFL package on ESPN allows Disney to move it to another platform. We don't know. We
don't, and we'd have to see the details, and we may never know until we're reading about it postscript in the paper or whatever. But I'd be willing to bet that Disney's got various clauses that get them access.
I don't know if that's true for the NFL. It certainly probably is for some of the lesser networks.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Or sports products. Yeah.
Yeah, for the Sun Belt Conference, they probably
like
have
the WNBA, which is like the charity signing. They would probably take broadcast wherever they can get it.
By the way, I did figure it out. Viacom is CBS and NBC is Comcast and all them.
Okay, so all right. So to summarize, then Viacom is CBS, NBC is Comcast, and then Disney is ABC, ESPN, and now Fox. It's 20th Century Fox, which is the movie network. Everything basically
non-news.
But the Fox News product. So that's your media.
Your local Fox 5 station is quasi part of that.
Yeah, that's like it's an affiliate.
Right.
And so the overall point here is now we have basically 3 companies in charge of everything, whereas 20 years ago there were 10 or 11 at least. Even the movie studios.
All those names that we listed were independent.
Yeah.
And it's all land grabs on 2 things: intellectual property libraries that they can monetize and own for time immemorial, and access to live events. Those are the 2 battlegrounds for these companies.
That's all they care about.
Right. Yep. Should we move on?
All right, we will. I would say we'll definitely put the link. If you care about any of the myriad of topics that we've discussed here, and probably a few other we haven't hit on, this article is a fascinating look, and the journalism here is of high quality. So if you care about this, it's a fascinating read.
Yeah, and by the way, I got this from Clay Travis's Twitter feed. I know he's a controversial dude, but he's actually pretty smart in the world of sports business and TV and media stuff. So if you follow that like we do, he's a good guy to keep up with in that regard.
All right, so next we're going to jump into something not too dissimilar. The Forbes' I think annual list of franchise valuations came out. It's always fascinating to sort of look at who the most valuable franchises on the face sports franchises on the face of the earth is, and unfortunately something that probably turns all of our collective stomachs, and if you are a decent human being should turn yours as well, is that the Dallas Cowboys are, again, I don't know if they've been knocked off on this list for quite some time, but I don't have the historical lists.
I do.
Number one. How many reigning years are they the champ on this?
Okay. And first of all, I think it's interesting that we talked about the Redskins side of this in last week's Hogsty, and at the time I couldn't find the article, because the internet was failing me and Alex had to help me out. But I do have it now. The Cowboys, actually, they've been trading off with Real Madrid. In 2016, the Cowboys were number 1. 2015, Real Madrid was number 1. Cowboys were 2. 2014, it was Real Madrid and Cowboys were 5. So it's gone back and forth, and Dallas has not had it, for a bunch of years.
Let me read it off. I'll just read the top 10 so people have it kind of in their ears here. It's number 1 is Dallas Cowboys. Number 2 is Manchester United. Number 3 is Real Madrid. 4 is Barcelona. 5 is the New York Yankees. 6 is the New England Patriots. 7, New York Knicks is an anomaly beyond belief. 8 is the Los Angeles Lakers. 8 is the New York Giants. 10 is the Golden State Warriors, the little engine that could there in the top 10. Actually tied for 10th with the Washington Redskins. So there is your top 10 at a glance. There are some interesting things even in this top 10. What pops out for you all?
Well, what pops off for me, and I said this on the Hogsty, is that in the football perspective, all of these teams have privately owned stadiums. Dallas, the stadium is owned by an entity controlled by Jerry Jones. The Patriots, Gillette Stadium is owned by Bob Kraft, or an entity controlled by Bob Kraft. The Giants is a private entity that is co-owned by the Jets, the ownership group of the Jets, and the ownership group of the Giants. And then the Redskins FedEx Field is owned by Dan Snyder entity. And so all of those teams, I think the value is increased because there's significant income to be had on stadiums, and I think that's big. And the other thing that pops out to me is that the New York teams, both the Yankees and the Knicks, are aided tremendously by the Yes Network, which is a privately held thing, and that's a part of it, and I think that increases their value tremendously. So that's my
being
initial.
in one of the wealthiest cities in the world also probably doesn't hurt.
I'm not trying to downplay the New York thing, but the income that they get from the Yes Network, I think, is a huge cash cow for them.
I think owning your own stadium and owning your own network are the kind of things that get you in this list.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know about the soccer, in terms of who owns the stadiums, that Manchester United and, Real Madrid place. But as much as I hate soccer, I think the reason why they are so valuable is that their fan bases are so huge in Europe. Just, because we're not talking about just the United States here. We're talking about an entire continent and probably others.
The big ones they're global. You go to South America and people are fans there, and I mean, I don't know offhand, but didn't the rights for the Premier League just get redone in the U.S. for a massive amount of money recently?
It's not a massive amount. ESPN holds the rights. It's nowhere near the massive amount that is being paid to the NFL and the NBA.
I thought it went to NBC.
But for them, it's sugar on top in terms of that income from U.S. rights. I mean, it's just plain market, right? Like they just have a much larger market than definitely NFL, and NBA's expanding. I think NBA is actually chomping at the heels of soccer kind of long term in terms of international market, but still, is pretty far back.
And yes, Alex is right. It's NBC. I misspoke.
Does the NFL have TV rights deals all over the world at this point? Or
yes.
Okay.
They do. There's a TV rights deal in Australia. There's one, and I know at least in Great Britain. I think it's the Sky Network. I think how it has. I think don't hold me to
it
that.
It is for all of you that illegally use streams to watch NFL games. You're watching the Sky Network generally.
Can't say I haven't had to do that every once in a while. So sorry out there for those of you who are listening. Yes, I have cheated on that. But anyway, okay. So valuation. So here's the other thing. If you go back to, I have the data back to 2010. Now, back in 2010, the Dallas Cowboys were valued at $1.65 million. The Redskins were number 4 on the list. In 2010, Manchester United was number 1. Cowboys number 2, $1.65 million. Yankees number 3, $1.6 million. Redskins number 4 at $1.55 million, and the Patriots $1.36 million. Now the valuations this year, 2017. I mean, for those of you who are in any way interested in finance and money, hold on. $4.8 billion Dallas Cowboys. That's almost 3 times. That's over 3 times the amount it was valued as 8 years ago. Manchester United, $4.1 billion. Real Madrid, $4.08 billion. Yankees, $4 billion. The Redskins, $3.1 billion. And so that is a 300% increase in just 8 years. And just as an example, Jerry Jones bought the Dallas Cowboys in 1989 for $140 billion, and that included the stadium. $140 million. That is if you pull out your hand in the Andy slide rule out there and check it, that is a 3,400% increase in, 29 years. I don't know if you can find any product or any investment on any market anywhere in the world that has increased that much. It is unbelievable. And so the question I think I have for you guys is it going to level off? Or are we going to see another 8 years sports franchise is worth $15 billion?
I think it's going to have to level off just because eventually you're going to run out of people who can buy these things. And, so there's that factor into, like you can't have, Jeff Bezos could buy every NFL team, but how many other people like that are there?
Yeah, he's the richest man in the history of the world.
Well, aside from some kings who they don't really count the money.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it'll level off because of that factor, if not just because eventually there is going to be a burst of the whole entertainment bubble globally. And, when that happens, I think all bets are off as to what these things are valued as.
Yeah, I mean, $140 million isn't pocket change, right? I mean, I could dig it out of my couch, but most people can't dig that out of their couch. Yeah, but you didn't have to be a big billionaire to own a sports team back then. I think the Lakers, for example, were bought by the Buss family for, from our beloved Jack Kent Cooke, rest in peace, for something like 30, 40 million. It wasn't much, and that was the Lakers, the preeminent franchise in basketball. And yes, I know this. Don't at me. I know the Celtics. Stop. But point is, these teams, you have to be a billionaire now, because if people don't know this, at least the NFL and baseball and NBA have rules about how much can be financed. You can't just finance the entire thing. You have to have a major capital injection on your own, and that basically means you have to be a really rich guy, not just a dude who can convince banks to give you money.
But at this point, we're not even talking about you have to be a billionaire. You need to be a multi-billionaire, like a $10 billion plus in your bank account.
I mean, if you're going to pay cash, but that's why you see all these ownership groups. Because nobody can raise the capital anymore, and so you have to have an ownership group of 5 to 10 people, and then one guy has to be designated as the principal. But you just can't raise the cash anymore. It's a good point.
Even something like we talked about the NHL around the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we looked at the cost of the entry costs of the Las Vegas Knights, even compared to new expansion franchises. I think had been within 10 years, and maybe even a little quicker, had skyrocketed. So, it's hard to say that there won't be some bubble burst. I mean, that's just sort of how these things work in general. What I will say, though, is that, this trend has been pretty global economic collapse proof so far. It's not like we haven't had some pretty giant shakeups in the time that these valuations have continued to tick up and up at pretty large jumps. So, it has proven, these franchises and this kind of list have proven some resiliency through some pretty tough global economic downturns.
Well, I mean, Steve went back to what, 2010, right?
Yeah.
So that's right after the last big global downturn. If you're really
right, but if you went back to, if you went to 2005, you probably still you don't see dips. You still increase.
True.
Yeah, certainly. And I think sports is one of the few products that's fairly resilient to downturns, because at a minimum, even if people have no money, you can still watch a baseball game on TV at a bare minimum. And so the ratings aren't going to be affected tremendously by economic downturns, particularly if they're on network TV and you don't have to have cable.
Yeah, but I mean, there is this trend that a lot of these companies are trying to move away from networks to start their own thing. I mean,
yeah, nowadays, yeah. I mean,
nowadays.
But I just think sports fandom is fairly recession proof.
Sure.
And because you're not going to go to take a vacation to an amusement park, maybe, but you can always watch a football game. No matter how much money you don't have, you can always probably watch football.
And the cost of distribution and the cost to receive that distribution is actually declining. So it also means that the cost for doing these things is actually on the way down. Before you needed cable, you needed a big TV. Now everything's serviced to your phone. It comes with your data plan, et cetera, et cetera. So also the pipes of delivery are cheaper.
Well, yeah, because you can buy, you can subscribe to ESPN's streaming service, for example, for a few dollars a month.
I think it's $10 a month or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Aren't they all $10 a month?
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood at least. And I personally don't, because that's just me. But those of people who are cord cutting, you can do that. Like HBO has an HBO Go, that has a tremendous following because of Game of Thrones, mainly. And you can. CBS has an online thing you can subscribe to, and they put unique content on their streaming service. For example, you can stream all these products that you want without having to spend $250 a month on
and
cable.
You're not shooting satellites off in the air. You're not having to build big transmitter towers. I mean, also most of this is on top of publicly financed or already built internet infrastructure. So there's a lot less cost in terms of how to broadcast your signal.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, but in terms of the sports franchise valuation, I mean, that goes into part of it. But I mean, the explosion of values is a direct link to the TV rights. Make no mistake that there has not been a 3,400% increase in franchise values in the past 29 years because more people are going to football games. It's because of these TV rights packages. And so this is directly tied. I don't want to get into the topic that Chris doesn't want to talk about, and you know what I'm talking about, Chris. But if TV ratings go down for whatever reason, and they stay down because NFL ratings have been down like 20%, and it's inarguable. You can argue about why, and we're not going to today, but it's inarguable that they're down. And if that trend continues, you may not see an increase in the next TV rights package, which will affect both franchise valuations, and it will affect the salary cap, which will affect the money in the players' pockets. And so that's where this increase, that and branding. We talk about this on the Hogsty. It's TV rights and branding. All the sponsorship agreements that they have, those are the things that really have tremendously increased franchise valuations.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. There's no disagreement here. And I think we've said this before, like a what seems like a fairly inconsequential dip in ratings can, equal millions and billions of dollars in contracts, etc. So what even looks
sometimes
trivial
I think these
isn't.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think the owners understand that, but I'm not sure the public and the players understand all this. Because certainly, I think the players and the public need to grasp the idea that the players get paid because the public supports them. Like I heard, I forget what football player it was. A football player this past week said, "Well, if you don't like what we're doing, don't come to the games." Well, do you realize that the only reason you're getting paid millions of dollars is because people are going to the games and because they're buying cable packages specifically to watch you. So don't discourage that. Don't bite off the hand that feeds you. So, does that bring us to our next topic?
Yeah,
Chris?
I think so. This is although it's fascinating. I was actually kind of looking for the first in the top 50, the first non-soccer NFL or NBA franchise, and there isn't.
I don't think.
Yeah.
No. Sorry, hockey.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We didn't really mention basketball, and so the Knicks are the Knicks and the Lakers are the top two basketball, and then
Right.
the Dodgers are the number 2 in baseball. So it's Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox, Cubs, Giants for baseball. The Dodgers being number 12.
There's not a lot. There's only three. I think 3 Major League Baseball franchise. 3. That's not a lot in top 50.
Well, no. There's the list. I'm on Wikipedia now. Let me see what.
I followed the links in the Forbes article.
Okay. Wikipedia is linking to the Forbes article Wikipedia is linking to the Forbes article, and this is the 2017 list, and the 2017 list by Wikipedia, which take it for what you will. Yankees number 2. Dodgers number 12, Red Sox 15, Cubs 16, Giants 17, and that's it for the top 20. And then basketball was Knicks, Lakers 9, and then you got to drop all the way down to 22 for the Bulls. That was the 2017 list.
Yeah, I'm quickly screening the current one.
But I think the point here
6 Major League Baseball franchises in the top 50.
Yeah. All of the football franchises basically are in the top, 50 as far as I know. Only a handful of baseball, a handful of basketball. So it's dominated by football and soccer as a sort of a general rule. That's the point, I think. Isn't that fair to say,
Yeah,
Chris?
I think definitely. So pretty interesting stuff here. We'll also put this link in the show notes so you can nerd out to your enjoyment as well. But I think definitely to recap, TV rights, stadium ownership, and rights are 2 huge drivers of who are the big dogs on this list.
Yeah, I'm always surprised that some of those like top tier racing teams, not NASCAR necessarily, but like Formula One, don't ever make it. But
I got in a Twitter argument with Mark Bullock about this exact topic. Mark
Oh,
Bullock,
really?
we love Mark Bullock, Hogsty fame. He's a great writer, football writer. And Mark put out on Twitter, I don't understand why Formula One isn't more popular in the United States. And I said, Mark, you're not getting it. It's because NASCAR is an American product. Americans by and large like American things, particularly when it comes to sports. And his response was, well, Formula One is faster, it's more exciting, the tracks are, harder.
And he's right about all that, but
I didn't
I
disagree with
understand
all
your
that,
point.
but the point is, and Mark, God bless him, is British. Americans don't care about that. They care about watching American things, and that's why NASCAR is way more popular just going in an oval.
Right, but Formula One makes more money globally. I will point that out.
Globally, yeah, absolutely.
But I'm just surprised none of those teams make that list. So
The interesting, I'd love to see where the most valued cricket franchise shows up on this list.
It doesn't.
Well, it doesn't in the top 50, but like if you went past, because that starts to look at like that's kind of that's the hockey to the NFL in terms of international market, because cricket's ginormous. globally. So it'd be kind of interesting to see.
I think that's the most popular sport in India.
And through parts of Europe. So anyway, we're getting totally nerdy here, but totally fascinating subject. Next one, probably fascinating for a much different level, is rumors abound that James Franco may be the director of a late night wars style ESPN movie, basically taking a book that was written about ESPN that had lots of gossipy type of, kind of rumor mill and kind of, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, basically in the early and middle days of ESPN, and taking that book and turning it into a movie similar to what's happened with Late Night Wars and other kind of TV entertainment complex stories. And is James Franco the right director, is an article that we saw. But just kind of funny. I'll tell you, I'd watch it in a second. So regardless of who directed it, I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can care less who directs it. But basically, you've got one of the faces of the Me Too, one of the villains of the Me Too movement, directing a movie about a network that has had all sorts of Me Too style problems. That's kind of the irony of it. But the James Franco article angle aside, I'm not sure this is a movie the ESPN's going to want to, really want to see out there too much, because a big part of that book was about all the sexual misconduct that goes on at ESPN. It's the book alleges, a real boys club locker room mentality, where you've got a bunch of athletes exposing themselves and doing inappropriate things to the females at the network, and all that stuff is what's going to make the movie interesting. That's what's going to be in the movie. And yes, it's ironic that James Franco is maybe the one, but I think this is going to be a movie that's damaging to the ESPN brand more than anything. That's what I think is more interesting than James Franco.
I don't know quite how to interpret this, because 5 years ago, ESPN almost probably welcomes a little bit of that, right? Because, the culture has shifted in terms of that. But like Bad Boys being Bad Boys, especially looking back 20, 25 years, North Dallas 40 is an example, as a book and a movie. There's all kinds of, the sort of sex, drugs, and rock and roll type stories that I think were much more palpable and kind of even give yourself a bit of an edgy brand. And ESPN back in those days, that was what they present. Not dick pics and other things, but like the kind of like upstart rebels kind of, thumb in the eye type of vibe was much of their early to mid run brand. So, but I agree, like in this current cultural climate, you probably can't get away with the cheekiness of Bad Boys being Bad Boys as something that's going to have a positive image, or even slightly damaging but kind of ultimately beneficial.
Yeah, but I mean, it'll still make for a good movie. That'll be the best part.
Yes, I don't disagree there. I'm talking about whether ESPN's going to like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, ESPN is going to like it. Who knows? But to a certain extent, I think any attention's good attention. So any press is good press. Is an old adage in Hollywood, and if this movie drives people to check ESPN out just to see if it really is this boys club culture, they may not admit this out loud, but privately behind closed doors they may like it. I guess I should say it like that.
But I don't think anyone has any illusions that ESPN is still what they were then.
They just fired Ed Werder and a few others.
People I've heard of who worked there, it's kind of more of a grind these days than anything else.
Well, Alex, you're our movie guy. Is the fact that James Franco is the director, is that going to matter to anybody?
Not really. I mean, it'll matter to a very small number of people, but he had this era of like 5 years or so that he was really just the it guy, and that's kind of past. He's still relevant, but his prime window, I think, closed a few years ago.
I think if it wasn't for Me Too, it would be pretty he'd still be riding that a little bit, or it would still be, oh, that's an interesting choice. I mean, I think you could make a pretty strong case that between the Golden Globes and the Oscar nominations, his name was stricken off that potentially because the Me Too stuff broke right after the Golden Globes. So, you take that away, and I think it's probably seen as like a hip, edgy kind of auteur move. But the bloom's off for whatever reason now.
But I also think that most of the people aren't cinemaphiles. I'm like, Alex, this is one of your big interests, and I,
Yes.
but I'm not sure that's the case
I've
for
watched
everybody.
2 movies already since this morning. So
okay, well, fair enough. But, like for me, I'm not that into Hollywood and all that. I don't like most of those people, or at least what I know about most of those people. I don't know if I would either go or not go see a movie because of any director outside of Michael Moore. And I don't know if the public is going to care at all. The majority of the public.
I think that's way too much me search. Hollywood is hugely popular. Who makes things, who does things, definitely moves the needle for people that are connected and are going to spend their money.
Yeah, but I don't think Franco him directing is not going to move the needle for most people.
So you're saying that my views are not the norm then?
Yes.
No, your views are way in the minority.
I don't think people care about who directs movies. Who cares who directs movies?
People definitely care who directs movies.
When it's a name like Spielberg or Tarantino or any of the big name directors, people care.
I guess. I mean, I'll take you guys' word for it because I just don't view it like that.
Why would Disney, when Disney took over the Star Wars franchise, it's sort of backfired on them, but like finding and up-leveling like new directors and building cachet around those directors was one of their major business strategies.
Yeah, they also, at the same time, would go with a huge name like Abrams or Ron Howard to try and salvage Han Solo.
So I think... whether you care or not, I think is fine. But I do think, just the same way you follow the NFL or sports, there's probably even a bigger audience that cares about those minutia moves within the industry.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. I mean, you guys are probably right about it. So I don't know. From my perspective, I care more about the effect of the movie on ESPN than I do about James Franco. But to each their own.
I don't think it'll have much of an effect on ESPN in the end either, frankly. I mean, you're just saying, hey, this is Chris Berman might have been a little skeevier than you want to pretend he was. That's it.
You know that from YouTube. Those Chris Berman outtake clips are gold.
Yeah.
There's a bunch out there. Bill O'Reilly's got a bunch of those. That are good.
Oh, yeah. Bill O'Reilly's famous for being an asshole.
Yeah.
Well, he's famous for being on his couch now.
He's still getting paid. Yeah, hot mic stuff is awesome. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, I don't know if we can beat the ESPN movie to death anymore.
Yeah, but this is interesting. We'll see. I think the thing that'll be fascinating if it moves to this is casting. That's where it gets fun.
Sure.
It's so hard to do casting for people who are alive right now, because you can just look at the guy, like who's going to play Chris Berman? Is he going to look and sound like Chris Berman? It's just if it's not Chris, you're right. That's exactly right. Like if you watch the Jay Leno and David Letterman movie from 20 years ago now, neither one of them looked a thing like Letterman or Leno or Paul Schaefer. You had to kind of suspend reality for that.
John Goodman, that's the early front runner for Chris Berman.
He's too old, though. He's older.
You can't
than
play
Chris
him.
Berman.
I guess you can't play the early years.
And John Goodman is about 1.5 feet taller than Chris Berman, too.
Come on. Hollywood magic.
I'm
they
trying
can
to
figure
look
that
up
out.
an image of Chris Berman in the 1980s. Just to...
Anyway.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. So I will definitely go watch the movie, put it that way. No matter who, I don't care who directs it, as long as it's not Michael Moore. I will definitely go see the movie because to me
I think you're safe on that one. So...
Michael Moore doesn't really direct fiction.
Thank God. Well, all his movies are fiction, but that's another topic for another day.
Or never, hopefully.
Yeah, never. That's better.
So if you've got ideas for casting legendary ESPN talking heads through the years, definitely tweet them at the Hogsty with the hashtag IJB. Be a fun conversation to sort of and send a link or a headshot or Wikipedia so we can actually get a little bit of the visual and a rationale why. I might throw a couple out there as I think about this as well. That's kind of a fun.
This Chris Berman one's really stumping me.
Well, you just got to go. You just got to start from portly actors and work out.
But
how about the
Mad
guy
Max
from?
wasn't portly yet.
Nah,
Oh,
he's
I was
still
going to say
chunky.
the guy from the guy from Seinfeld.
Wayne
No, you're
Knight?
talking George.
Yeah, him. Yeah,
Jason Alexander.
yeah. Isn't he a Berman-like guy?
I wouldn't. No,
No?
I wouldn't.
Well, he's
bet
already
that.
played Tony Kornheiser
Okay.
on TV.
That's true.
Okay, but I'm the wrong person to be asking about any casting decisions at all. I don't
And
know.
again, you're going way too old with it. You got to be thinking guys in their
Yeah,
late
yeah. You
20s.
probably have to
You'll
trend
find
young.
some young guy we've never heard of, probably.
Well, that's the way to battle what you're talking about in terms of preconceived notions. Is you cast a bunch of unknowns, because then at least you can project what they don't have a history in the viewer's minds that they're connecting it to. It's easier for the leaps in physical differences to happen with somebody who's a bit of a blank slate than someone that you know.
Well, 'cause
and
like the
thinking
Howard.
about the director, it's going to be Seth Rogen. That'll be who plays Chris Berman.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Franco and Rogan. But it's like like the Howard Stern movie worked because Howard Stern played himself.
Right.
You can't that kind of outsized personality. You can't really find someone else to do it. And the same may be true for some of these big ESPN personalities. Like Berman is tough. Berman is because he's such a big personality. It may be tough.
It's hard. There's two interesting ones we're getting. Is Michael Chiklis, went on to in The Shield and played The Thing and has got a pretty decent career. He almost had dead on arrival career because he played Belushi in a Belushi biopic. Yes.
Really?
And it almost ruined his career. Dan Aykroyd said he went on a hate campaign against it. It was based on, I think, the Bob Woodward book, right? That wrote the book about him, was based on that. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. And it almost ruined Michael Chiklis' career. And I can't think of the comedian's name, but the guy that played Letterman in the Late Night Wars has actually gone on to have a great comedic careers in a bunch of the Christopher Guest movies and stuff. So it's actually interesting. And both of them, like I said, were blank slates when they got cast as these big, personalities that people know and that are in the culture. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Now we've turned into a Hollywood business podcast.
Yeah, but you're right. Seth Rogen will be involved in that project somehow, some way. There's no
Right.
doubt.
Well, I mean, someone's got to get all the drugs to the set, so that's what he'll do.
Cinema Verite.
That's true.
All right, I think this is a good indicator that we have come to the end of this episode of It's Just Business. But seriously, love to keep this conversation going on Twitter. I think it's a fun one to see who you'd cast in any of these roles or thoughts about that. You can do that at the Hogstye account with the hashtag IJB, or if you want to include me or get at me directly, you can find me at ChrisLarry33. Super sub Eric Sato. Alex, what's your Twitter handle?
Alex35332. I mean, just start following the Hogstye. Eventually, I reply to everything that is there, so you'll find me there.
And Steve, we know your alias is the Hogstye.
Yes.
All right, we will see you in 2 weeks' time, and so see you then. Goodbye.